the haunted forest. As the group of friends began their journey into the haunted forest, they couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. They had heard rumors and stories about the forest their whole lives, stories about the forest being cursed, about the ghosts of long-dead settlers who still haunted the forest to this day. The forest was said to be a place of unspeakable horrors, a place where the laws of nature were twisted and the dead refused to rest in peace. The forest's reputation had been passed down from generation to generation, and the group had grown up hearing stories about it. Many had tried to explore the forest over the years, but few had ever returned. The ones who did come back were always changed, their eyes haunted, and their minds full of fear. Despite the warnings, the group had decided to venture into the forest to see if the stories were true. As they walked deeper into the forest, they could feel the weight of its reputation bearing down on them. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, and they wondered what horrors lay ahead. As the group made their way deeper into the haunted forest, they stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin. It was clear that the cabin had not been inhabited in years, and it was in a state of disrepair. The windows were boarded up, and the roof had several holes in it. The group was hesitant to approach the cabin, but they were also curious about what they might find inside. As they cautiously approached the cabin, they could hear the sound of creaking wood and rustling leaves. The forest seemed to be alive around them, and they could feel its energy pulsing through the air. As they got closer to the cabin, they could see that the door was slightly ajar. It was as if someone or something had recently passed through it. Despite their apprehension, the group decided to investigate. They pushed open the door and stepped inside. The inside of the cabin was just as dilapidated as the outside. The furniture was old and covered in dust, and the air was stale and musty. It was clear that no one had been there in a long time. As they searched the cabin, they found a journal tucked away in a corner. The journal belonged to a settler who had lived in the forest over 100 years ago. The entries in the journal spoke of strange occurrences in the forest, of ghostly apparitions and mysterious noises. The group realized that the forest's reputation was well earned, and they couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as they read the journal's entries. As the group continued their trek through the haunted forest, they began to hear strange noises. At first, they thought it was just the wind, but as the noises grew louder and more persistent, they realized that something was not right. The noises were not like anything they had heard before. They were otherworldly, like the whispers of ghosts carried on the breeze. As they pressed on, the noises grew louder and more intense. They could hear what sounded like footsteps following them, though when they turned to look, there was no one there. The air was thick with an eerie energy, and the group was on edge, their nerves frayed. As they walked, they began to notice strange things around them. The trees seemed to twist and contort in unnatural ways, and the shadows danced and shifted. It was as if the forest itself was alive, and it was toying with them. The group began to feel like they were being watched, like eyes were following their every move. They couldn't shake the feeling of unease, and their pace quickened. It was clear that something was not right in the haunted forest, and the group began to fear for their safety. They knew that they had to find a way out before it was too late. As the group continued through the haunted forest, the trees and brush grew thicker, and the path they had been following became less and less distinct. They had been wandering for what felt like hours, and they realized that they were hopelessly lost. Panic began to set in as they realized that they had no idea which way to go. They had no food or water, and the forest was starting to grow dark. The sounds of the strange noises and the rustling of leaves around them only added to their growing sense of dread. As they searched for a way out, they stumbled upon a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a large stone altar, surrounded by strange symbols and candles. The altar was covered in strange markings, and the candles flickered in the breeze. It was as if the forest was trying to tell them something, but they couldn't decipher its message. The group was too afraid to approach the altar, but they knew they needed to find a way out of the forest. As they turned to leave the clearing, they heard a strange voice calling out to them. It was faint, but it was unmistakable. It was a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. They followed the voice, hoping that it would lead them to safety, but instead, it led them deeper into the forest. As they stumbled through the thick underbrush, the voice grew louder, and they realized with horror that they were being led into a trap. As the group stumbled through the forest, following the strange voice that seemed to be leading them deeper into the haunted forest, they came across a small cabin. The cabin was old and decrepit, its walls covered in moss and vines. The door hung off its hinges, and the windows were shattered. Despite their better judgment, the group decided to take shelter in the cabin. It was getting late, and they were tired, hungry, and scared. They needed a place to rest, even if it was just for a little while. As they entered the cabin, they realized that something was not right. The air was thick with an unsettling energy, and the cabin was filled with strange symbols and markings. The walls were covered in scratches, and the floorboards creaked under their feet. It was clear that the cabin was not abandoned. They could hear the sounds of movement coming from the other room. As they cautiously approached, they realized that they were not alone. There was something in the cabin with them. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, and they were trapped. They could hear strange whispers coming from the walls, and the air grew colder. They tried to open the door, but it was locked from the outside. It was clear that they were not meant to leave the cabin. As the group huddled together trying to find a way out, they realized that they were not alone. The cabin was haunted, and they were trapped with something sinister. They didn't know what it was or how to fight it, but they knew that they had to find a way to escape before it was too late. As the group huddled together, trapped in the haunted cabin, they began to hear strange noises coming from outside. It sounded like the trees were moving, as if something was approaching. They peered out of the broken windows and saw shadowy figures moving through the forest. They couldn't make out their features, but they could sense that they were not friendly. They were moving closer and closer to the cabin. The group realized that they were in grave danger. They didn't know what the shadowy figures wanted or how to protect themselves, but they knew they had to try. They searched the cabin for any weapons they could find. They found an old axe and some broken pieces of wood, but they knew that it wouldn't be enough to fight off the shadowy figures. As the figures drew nearer, the group prepared to defend themselves. But before they could even raise their makeshift weapons, the figures disappeared. They vanished into thin air, leaving the group alone in the forest once again. The group was shaken by the experience, but they knew that they couldn't stay in the cabin any longer. They had to find a way out of the haunted forest and back to safety. As they ventured back out into the forest, they realized that the shadowy figures were still following them. They could feel their presence all around them, and they knew that they were in grave danger. They had to find a way out of the forest before it was too late. The group had been wandering through the haunted forest for what felt like hours. They were tired, hungry, and scared. They had encountered all manner of horrors in the forest, from strange voices to shadowy figures, but nothing had prepared them for what they were about to face. As they trudged through the thick underbrush, they suddenly felt a force pulling them towards a particular direction. It was as if something unseen was trying to guide them. They tried to resist the force, but it was too strong. It dragged them through the forest, twisting and turning through the trees until they came to a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a large, ancient tree. It was unlike any tree they had ever seen before. Its bark was rough and twisted, and its branches reached towards the sky like gnarled fingers. As they approached the tree, they could feel the force growing stronger. It was as if the tree was calling out to them, drawing them closer. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet began to shake. The tree's roots burst forth from the ground, twisting and turning like serpents. The group stumbled back, their hearts pounding with fear. The tree began to glow with an otherworldly energy. The group watched in horror as the tree transformed before their eyes, morphing into a towering, demonic figure. The figure towered over them, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly light. It spoke to them in a language they couldn't understand, but they knew that it was something ancient and malevolent. The group tried to flee, but the unseen force held them in place. They were trapped, face to face with the demonic figure. They didn't know what it wanted, but they knew that they had to find a way to escape before it was too late. As the group continued through the forest, they could hear the faint whispers of voices on the wind. They sounded like they were coming from all around them, but they couldn't tell what they were saying. The whispers grew louder and more distinct as they moved deeper into the forest. They sounded like the voices of lost souls, trapped in the haunted forest for all eternity. The group tried to ignore the voices, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They kept glancing over their shoulders, but they couldn't see anyone or anything lurking in the shadows. As they pressed on, the whispers became more urgent. It was as if the voices were trying to tell them something, warning them of a looming danger. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder and more frantic. The group could make out the words now, and they were words of warning. "Get out! Get out while you still can!" The group froze in terror. They knew that they had to listen to the voices, but they didn't know how to escape the forest. They had become hopelessly lost, and they didn't know which way was out. The whispers continued to grow louder and more persistent. They seemed to be guiding the group towards something, but they couldn't tell what. As they followed the voices, the forest grew darker and more ominous. The trees seemed to twist and writhe around them, as if they were alive and watching their every move. The group knew that they were in grave danger, but they didn't know what to do. They had to find a way out of the forest before it was too late. The group continued following the whispers, and soon they stumbled upon a small clearing in the forest. The clearing was eerily quiet, and the group felt as though they were being watched by an unseen force. As they looked around, they noticed a strange symbol etched into the ground. It was a circle with intricate designs inside, and it seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder and more urgent. They were telling the group to leave the clearing, but they couldn't see a way out. The trees around them had closed in, and the only path seemed to lead straight through the symbol. Despite the warnings, the group hesitantly stepped into the circle. As soon as they did, the air around them grew thick with a dark energy. They could feel a presence in the clearing, something malevolent and ancient. The group tried to turn back, but they found themselves trapped in the circle. The symbol seemed to be pulsing with a dark power, and the group felt as though they were being pulled deeper into the clearing. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the center of the circle. It was tall and shadowy, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. The group could feel the figure's malevolence radiating off of it in waves. The figure spoke in a voice that seemed to come from all around them. "You have trespassed in my domain. Now, you will pay the price." The group tried to run, but they couldn't escape the circle. The figure continued to advance on them, and they could feel its dark energy consuming them. As the figure closed in, the group was consumed by a blinding light. When they opened their eyes again, they found themselves outside the clearing, surrounded by the safety of the forest. As the group continued their journey through the haunted forest, they stumbled upon an old cabin. The cabin was dilapidated and covered in vines, but there was something eerie and foreboding about it. Despite the warnings from the forest and their own instincts, the group decided to investigate the cabin. They cautiously approached the entrance, and as they stepped inside, they were hit with a wave of musty air. The cabin was dark and musty, with cobwebs covering the corners of the room. The group noticed strange symbols etched into the walls, and the floorboards creaked beneath their feet. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the cabin, causing the candles in the room to flicker. The group felt a presence in the room, something that was watching them from the shadows. As they explored further, the group noticed strange objects scattered around the room. There was an old book with strange symbols etched into the cover, a rusty knife with dried bloodstains, and a collection of bones that looked like they belonged to animals. The group tried to leave, but the door had mysteriously locked behind them. They were trapped in the cabin, with no way out. As the group searched for a way to escape, they could hear strange noises coming from the walls. It sounded like something was scratching at the wood, trying to get in. Panic set in as the scratching grew louder, and suddenly the door creaked open. The group ran out into the night, never looking back at the abandoned cabin. After escaping the abandoned cabin, the group continued their journey through the haunted forest. The night was dark and foreboding, with the sound of crickets and owls echoing through the trees. As they walked, they saw a faint glow in the distance. They cautiously approached the light, and as they got closer, they saw a ghostly figure hovering in the air. The figure was translucent and glowed with an ethereal light. It had long hair and wore a white dress, and its eyes were black and hollow. The group was frozen with fear, unsure of what to do. The ghostly figure floated closer to them, and suddenly it spoke. Its voice was soft and haunting, echoing through the trees. "I am the spirit of the forest," it said. "You have trespassed in my domain, and for that, there will be consequences." The group tried to run, but the ghostly figure followed them, hovering just out of reach. It seemed to be leading them deeper into the forest, and the group had no choice but to follow. As they walked, the forest grew darker and more sinister. The trees twisted and contorted, forming grotesque shapes that seemed to reach out and grab at them. The ghostly figure led them to a clearing, where they saw a strange altar surrounded by candles. The group realized too late that they had been led into a trap. The ghostly figure vanished, and the group was left alone in the clearing, surrounded by the eerie glow of the candles. They knew that they were not alone, and that something sinister was lurking in the shadows. The group was trapped in the clearing, surrounded by the eerie glow of the candles. They knew they were not alone, and that something sinister was lurking in the shadows. Suddenly, they heard a blood-curdling scream. It was coming from the woods, and it sounded like it was getting closer. The group huddled together, trying to stay calm, but they knew that something terrible was about to happen. Out of the darkness, a figure emerged. It was tall and gaunt, with long arms and razor-sharp claws. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its mouth twisted into a malevolent grin. The group realized that they were facing the evil that had haunted the forest for centuries. It was a demon that had been summoned by the ghostly figure, and it had come to claim their souls. The demon lunged at the group, its claws slashing through the air. The group scattered, trying to avoid its deadly grasp. They fought back with all their might, using whatever weapons they had at their disposal. But the demon was too powerful, too fast, too otherworldly. Just when all seemed lost, a bright light appeared on the horizon. It was the dawn, breaking through the darkness of the haunted forest. The demon let out a terrifying scream, and then it was gone, vanished into thin air. The group was exhausted and battered, but they were alive. They emerged from the forest, grateful to have survived their ordeal. But they knew that the memory of the haunted forest would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The group stumbled out of the haunted forest, their bodies battered and their minds in turmoil. They had survived the ordeal, but they were forever changed by what they had witnessed. They were relieved to be back in civilization, but they knew that the memory of the forest would never leave them. They couldn't shake the feeling that they had been marked by the evil that had once resided in those woods. As they tried to resume their normal lives, they found that they couldn't escape the haunting memories of the forest. They would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, reliving the terror of that fateful night. Some members of the group even started experiencing strange occurrences, as if the ghostly figure and demon were still following them. They would see shadows moving in the corners of their eyes, hear whispers in the wind, and feel a chill in the air. They knew that they had to do something to put an end to the haunting once and for all. They decided to seek out a group of paranormal investigators who specialized in exorcisms and cleansing rituals. The investigators agreed to help them, and they returned to the haunted forest armed with knowledge and equipment. They performed a series of cleansing rituals, banishing the evil that had once resided there. As the group watched the investigators work, they felt a weight lifted from their shoulders. The forest was no longer haunted, and they could finally put their ordeal behind them. But they knew that they would never forget the horrors that they had witnessed. The haunted forest had left a permanent mark on their lives, a reminder that evil could lurk in the most unexpected places. Just as the group thought their ordeal was over, they received a package in the mail. It was from the same person who had sent them the mysterious invitation to the haunted forest. Inside the package was a letter, along with a series of photographs. The letter explained that the sender was actually a descendant of the family who had once owned the forest, and that they had been trying to uncover the truth about the haunting for years. The photographs showed the family's ancestral home, which had once stood on the edge of the forest. The home had burned down under mysterious circumstances, and it was believed that the ghostly figure and demon were responsible. The letter went on to explain that the family had been practicing dark rituals in the forest for generations, and that they had unwittingly unleashed an ancient evil upon the land. The sender urged the group to spread the truth about the haunted forest, and to make sure that the family's dark legacy was never forgotten. As the group read the letter, they were filled with a sense of dread. They realized that they had been unwittingly caught up in a much larger, more sinister plot. They knew that they had to share the truth about the haunted forest, but they also knew that doing so would put them in danger. They had seen firsthand the power of the evil that had once resided in the woods, and they knew that it would stop at nothing to protect its secrets. The group made a pact to never forget what had happened in the haunted forest, and to always remain vigilant against the forces of darkness. They knew that the truth could be dangerous, but they also knew that it was their duty to share it with the world. The group went their separate ways after their harrowing experience in the haunted forest. Some returned to their normal lives, while others found it difficult to shake the feeling of unease that had settled over them. As time passed, rumors began to circulate about the haunted forest. Some claimed that they had seen ghostly figures moving among the trees, while others reported hearing strange voices whispering in the darkness. Despite the group's efforts to spread the truth about the haunted forest, many people dismissed their claims as nothing more than urban legends and tall tales. But the group knew that the haunting was real. They had seen it with their own eyes, and they had the scars to prove it. Years passed, and the group stayed in touch, always keeping an eye on the rumors surrounding the haunted forest. They were relieved to see that the tales of ghostly apparitions and demonic forces had started to fade away. But then, one day, a new rumor surfaced. It was said that a group of hikers had gone missing in the haunted forest, and that their bodies had never been found. The group knew that they had to act. They had to go back to the forest and investigate what had happened. They knew that it was risky, but they also knew that they were the only ones who could uncover the truth. So they returned to the haunted forest, armed with flashlights, cameras, and a fierce determination to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within its dark and twisted depths.